And when things happen that are out of my control, like losing a job, losing a client, losing a family member, that I know that my self-worth will carry me through those lower points. And without my self-worth, I don't know that I would have the mental strength that I have to get through and power through the crappy times.
You know what? As many people as there are on this planet, there are opinions about you.
Welcome back to Unapologetic Rabble-Rousers, episode 47. I'm DocShellie.
And I'm Carla Lewis. And we are going to follow up the episodes we just did on bullying. And we're going to dig into self-worth. Because if there is ever an opportunity for us to actually question that concept of self-worth, it would be in the face of bullying. So we want to put that crap behind us. We want to talk about self-worth, what it is, where we find it, how it matters. What do you think, Shelley?
All that good stuff. So I want to start with a definition, so we're all operating under the same thought pattern of what exactly is self-worth. And so this comes from the American Psychological Association, not at all sponsoring this podcast.
Oh, but what a good idea.
Hey. So they define self-worth as an individual's evaluation of themselves as a valuable, capable human being deserving of respect and consideration. They go on to say that positive feelings of self-worth tend to be associated with a high degree of self-acceptance and self-esteem. I like this definition because I think a lot of people convolute self-worth, that it's the same thing as self-esteem, that it's the same thing as self-acceptance, self-confidence, and all those other self-words. But I think that self-worth is a foundational element where our esteem may come and go depending on certain situations. But if inherently I have self-worth, then the self-esteem dips probably aren't going to flatten.
I would accept that. And one of the things that just is kicking me in my gut right now is the notion of the self and worth. Putting that concept together, being able to pull from within an appreciation for who I am, how I am, what has brought me to this point in my life, all of those things. But how often is it that self-worth actually caves in to external signals that almost become more important, more influential than my own knowledge of me?
Yeah, I think that's a really poignant point. Let's say that 10 times fast. I can think of times in my career where I know I'm good at what I do. I'm a good employee. I execute at a high level. And there's been times where I've worked for people that just want to just keep shoving you down. And they do that so much that eventually you're like, God, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Maybe I'm not very good at this. Maybe I shouldn't be working here. And it really starts to mess with your head. And then that impacts so many other areas of your life.
I think the question in all of that is, so when does it shift? When does my sense of worth shift from what I know to be true and give way to inputs that I might not even be able to validate, that are coming from around me? Maybe it's people, maybe it's environments, maybe it's the news, maybe whatever it is, but that if self-worth is in and of itself completely contained with, it's me,
in this vessel,
it's about self. And then these other signals come in. I guess it would be interesting to understand more about, when is it that we relegate that measure of worth to other people's inputs? What is it that leaves us floating along and saying, I thought I had it all together. We've talked, how many times have we talked about boundary management and gaslighting and mutual respect and micro management? Go ahead, you can say it. But there are all of these things that we've touched on in the last 46 episodes. Oh my goodness. That are floating around in this pool that we're talking about now, which is this self-worth. And so where are we pulling it from? And what is it that motivates us to pull it from places that may not be core to self?
Yeah. I think it's interesting because I don't know how I know how you grew up, but like in terms of this, like there was always a comparison to other people. Why can't you be more like your brother? Because he's a jerk. No, I love my brother. He's a jerk. I don't want to be like my brother. I want to be like me. Why can't you be more like whoever lives down the street? So there was always like this comparison,
Mhm.
and nobody meant any harm by it, but it was like that person's a little bit better at that sport than you. You should elevate your game. There was no malintent in that comparison. But then you go through life and you're constantly looking at other people, comparing yourself to other people and going, that's not my jam, but is that okay? That it's not my thing? Yeah, of course it's okay.
I,
And then you go in school, they grade on a curve, the comparison to other people. So there's just this constant comparing people. So I do it myself sometimes. I don't do it that often anymore. But so I think that's part of culture that many people grew up in is that just comparison to other people. And then gaslighting is such a great example of how quickly you can start to question your self-worth. We joked around a little bit about it in, I don't know, like episode 40, maybe 41. And we were joking like we were gaslighting each other a little bit, but like how easy it is to just say, no, you didn't do that. And then just from that one statement, you start to go, maybe I didn't do what I thought I did, or maybe I did do what I thought. Like it can really get in your head. It
I,
doesn't take
I,
much.
it does not take much. And I'd like to revisit a comment you made about as we were growing up and why can't you be more like Susie, or why can't you be more like your brother, or why aren't you as good at this as, and your comment was along the lines of, it wasn't that it was malintent behind that. And I just want to explore for a moment anyway, the fact that whenever somebody puts, especially a child, puts that child up against another standard and suggests that standard that
Mhm.
they're being compared against is a better representation of who I should be. So you're telling me I should be more like Susie, which is saying that Susie's standard is more what you would want and love from me than what you're getting. So I'm thinking we get set up rather early in life
Mhm.
on this whole notion of comparison. And I understand that it's not like trying to be mean and hurtful, but at the same time, it is mean and hurtful because I'm being me. I'm being the me that I think I'm supposed to be. And you're telling me I'm not a good enough me. And how does that not translate? Those old tapes, those of us who remember tapes, okay, but those old recordings, whatever technology you want to leverage here, that those things are so ensconced in our self-image, and anything that comes along and turns the volume up on
Mhm.
that recording, that old message,
Yeah.
that it's going to mess with us.
Mhm.
So I think while there may not be intentions that are bad, I think that recognizing that those comparisons, and as they translate now into our adult lives and performance reviews at work or comparison, whatever it might be, that there's some deeply rooted stuff there.
Yeah. I heard a great saying the other day about how people always say that wasn't my intention. So case in point here, right? That wasn't my intention. What's more important, that it wasn't your intention or the impact it had on the people around you?
Mm.
And I was like, oh, that's good.
Ooh,
It was a good one.
yeah, that
I
is
wish I could
good.
remember who said it, but I don't. But as you were talking, I'm also thinking about when you would go to, I was always in sports and stuff, so we always had to have sports physicals. And there was always the comparison to the standard. You're too short. You're only in the 70th percentile of height at your age. You're whatever. And it was like weight, height, muscular, like all those things. And then you think of the standardized tests in schools. There's always a comparison to a standard. And as I
Hmm.
think about my friends who are not a white, like not filled with white privilege, they've got neurodivergent, they're people of other cultures. Like they literally have been compared to these standards their whole lives in a very different way than I was. And so it really, when you think about that self-worth and fighting through the system that is set up against you, how no wonder we're such a messy society. There's just a lot of people walking around with no sense of self-worth unless someone has given it to them. And it should be
Well,
something that we inherently believe about ourselves, that we are worthy of respect, we are worthy of breathing air on this earth. And I don't know, it's now that we're talking about it, it's interesting.
it's what you just said about that the worth has been granted by someone else.
Yeah,
So where does this whole notion of self-worth is really about belief in the worth I hold, not necessarily that it's mine.
yeah,
So that whole imbuing that kind of image, of that kind of gradation, of that kind of sizing, how you meet whatever kind of standards, and you don't even get to control the standards
right.
against which you're being judged. And so the feedback comes in and it comes in sideways. And sometimes it's not so very sideways. Sometimes it's in your face. And so when we get into how am I holding on to, how am I gauging my self worth in relationship to what? What worth? What is the whole notion of me having worth from just myself? I'm wondering if we some maybe get caught in this sort of a toilet flush. You get swirled down. I I wanted to say swirly, but I couldn't find the word. Okay. But this notion that, okay, maybe as youngsters, we had a real appreciation for who we were. We were loved. We had fun. We could play. We could,
Carefree.
yeah, yeah. And for those of us who had that privilege, we didn't even recognize it was a privilege. It was just what
It
was.
was the life I
And
knew.
that's right.
Yeah.
So if we took from any beginning, if we took from any beginning and we say, okay, this is who I am, this is how I am, this is how I interact with the world around me. This is what I can do. It's not about, we weren't thinking back then about who we could be and all, we just were. You would just be,
Yeah.
not without roles and without rules, except of course the rules of the family and society and school and okay, I'm making a case against my own case. It's just that self-worth. What if we explored the value of understanding what it really means to have a good sense of your worth? What does it even mean? Now, I know you read a great definition for it.
Oh, I did.
I I know you did, but the it's like the so what?
I think for me, when I think about my self-esteem, it's always been amusing to me how many people have said to me, "You're so confident in everything you do." And I'm like, "Are you kidding me? I know how to fake it really well." But like the first time I stood up in front of 1,200 people to do a talk, I was shaking in my shoes. And I had so many people tell me, "Oh, you're so comfortable in front of all these people. How do you do it?" I'm like, I, I can't tell you how I did it. I just did. It was like, sometimes for me, I think there's no other option but to portray, I got this, because I usually do. And when I don't, I'll admit it. But I think it comes back to I know my intent is good. I know that I have a solid foundation of core values. And when things happen that are out of my control, like losing a job, losing a client, losing a family member, that I know that my self-worth will carry me through those lower points. And without my self-worth, I don't know that I would have the mental strength that I have to get through and power through the crappy times. I don't know that I would have been able to stand up to some of the bullies that I experienced in the workplace. I don't know that I would have handled the gaslighting I experienced as well as I did. Now, don't get me wrong, there were struggles in that. And there was a period of time where I worked for someone we both know who I was seriously like, I feel like I'm the gum on the bottom of people's shoes because of this one person and how many times she just treated me so poorly, questioned everything I did, and on. It starts to get in your head. But when I take time to self-reflect and I take time to journal, I know that is that person's problem and not mine. And that helps you get through the day to day because of that self-worth and that foundation.
And the strength comes from reflecting on what you know to be true in the face of the storm of external input.
Yeah.
I guess that's redundant, but in in the face of things coming at you from outside of you, which you can look at and question and even just marvel at the ridiculousness of them.
Yeah.
It's the strength comes from being in touch with who you are, what you stand for, what you're here to do,
Mm-hmm.
what you won't stand for, and the fact that all of that, that all comes from inside. That is not fed from the outside.
Right.
You feed yourself with the experiences you have, and you take those pieces and you hook them in where they fit. But it's you are harvesting as opposed to being gunned down by a fire hose. And I think maybe that the notion of that self-worth is about recognize that there's all, you know what, as many people as there are on this planet, there are opinions about you.
Yes.
And the fact of the matter is, those are just ideas that somebody else has, but you're the only one that really knows who you are, what you stand for, what matters to you,
Mm-hmm.
and what you will fight for, and what you will not at all give the time of day to even bother trying to fight it. It's just, no, there's crap, and then there's me, and they're not the same thing.
They
That
are
was
not
not,
the
that was
same thing.
it was wasn't very poetic. It wouldn't really probably, you couldn't really dance to it. But the notion is that anything that's coming in from outside you that does not resonate with what you know to be true inside of you is worth leaving outside.
Yeah, I think there's some value in hearing what people have to say and then measuring that to your own experience, what you know to be true, because people misinterpret things all the time, right? And then, where there's opportunity to clear something up, obviously do that. But all of that external input should not impact your self-worth. Because I feel like when people are doing things to you or around you that make you start to question your self-worth, that's not healthy. That's not a good relationship. It's not a good situation. And when you're
Mhm.
in it, it's hard to recognize. And so
Yeah.
people do start to question themselves, which is why I'm such a big believer in journaling and
Mm.
self-reflection, because we know who we are at our core. And if you don't know who you are at your core, get to work. Do some journaling,
Mm.
understand your core values, really figure out who you are, because who you are matters in this world. And it helps you navigate this crazy world we live in.
I think being able to take that time, not being able to, but investing that time in
Yes.
self for your benefit and then for the benefit of how you show up for others.
And how you
And
show up
even
for
being,
yourself.
thank you. That was the next point. Okay.
No, but I did want to say when you said everyone has an opinion, my friend's husband says opinions are like assholes. Everyone has one.
I think we should leave that in. Yeah. Um, what we're doing is establishing this base about self-worth.
Yeah.
So where would we want to take it next? Where would it be good for us to go from establishing this base of self-worth, the value of it, what it is, how it matters?
I think this is has been a great conversation. I think if we think about that external validation and internal self-worth, a question for everyone to consider is, where are you currently gathering your self-worth? Is it from other people or is it from yourself?
Mm.
And really take some time to reflect on that. And when we come back next week for episode 48, we'll talk a little bit more about cultivating self-worth and how you can establish more self-worth for yourself. So with that,
I'm Carla Lewis.
I'm DocShellie. Be sure to give us a like, share with your friends, and follow us on all your favorite podcast apps. We'll see you next time. A question for everyone to consider is, where are you currently gathering your self-worth? Is it from other people or is it from yourself?